Education has rightly taken center stage in democratic South Africa, given the role that experts have suggested it could play in transforming the country after the apartheid years. The whole Department of Education takes in almost a quarter of the national budget of the country as the government tries to ensure that South Africans are educated and ready for the new economy. So in conversation with me today is the Minister of Higher Education and Training, Naledi Pandor, to try to give us a sense of where she is taking her department in her second stint in that department. Minister, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And
let's begin by looking into your in-tray. As you come in for a second time, like I said, what are your priorities?
Well, it's a very, very full in-tray. We have higher education, that is universities and universities of technology. Then we also have the TVET sector, or technical and vocational education and training colleges. And the third rung are the sector education and training authorities. So this tray is massive. And the priority really is to ensure that our young people have opportunities in South Africa, but also that we have attention to the skills needs in South Africa and are responsive to those. So it would not make sense, for example, to have many young people entering our institutions, but we still lack electricians, we lack plumbers, we lack bricklayers. So I think my department must be attuned and keyed in to the skills needs of South Africa and should be able to link the opportunities we provide to the skill demands out there.
Yeah. Do you have the tools, do you have the resources that will be required to make that change? Because some have suggested that there needs to be a mindset change among South Africans in their approach to the employment environment. The suggestion being that mostly you get the sense that when kids leave school, they think they're going to look for jobs. And yet increasingly we hear the role that perhaps entrepreneurship could play, and that perhaps it's not getting the focus that it requires.
Compared to many countries on the African continent, we make substantial amounts available for education. But I think where our challenge is what you have said, that we tend to be a bit one-dimensional in thinking a qualification will lead to a job. And so in speaking to young people, I've been saying more and more that I want to hear about the people you're going to employ.
Right.
I want to hear about the enterprise you want to create. So I think if we could persuade more young people to think about starting their own small business and provide then support for them to be able to succeed, because I still think there's a gap between that ambition of a young person and the support mechanisms, the funding we have.
Does that require a curricular change from the bottom right up through to your level? Because some are suggesting that what you are finding is a misalignment or a mismatch between what the education system is producing and what the economy is calling for in terms of skills.
I remember a conversation with my colleague, the former minister in this portfolio, about introducing enterprise education in schools. And he, as a communist, balked.
That's what I was going to say.
That. And we had a bit of a, sort of difference of opinion. When he was Minister of Higher Education, he realized this is the area we need to do more on.
Right.
And he actually came to me and said, "Hey, Comrade Naledi, do you remember that chat we had about enterprise education? I agree with you now. We need to do more of that in the school system." So I think we have begun to infuse it. It's in the curriculum actually, but perhaps not sufficiently uplifted as what we want young people to absorb as an approach to life.
Yeah. What about the role of the private sector? I mean, you look at South African companies, you look at the JSE in terms of regulation, world class, without doubt about that. And you've got South African companies that have gone onto the global stage and have been able to do things. Are you including them in your change that you are anticipating on the education front?
Well, certainly, I would think institutions is not really what we should do, but when we speak
Yeah.
to universities and colleges, this is an aspect that we stress. And I'm, in my role as a minister, working very hard to establish partnerships between the private sector and the institutions I have responsibility for. Because I believe that we do need to ensure that private sector assists us in achieving some of our goals.
What do you think is the problem that has prevented the government and the private sector from working as partners on this?
I think we haven't made enough noise about partnerships
Yeah.
and have not sought them out actively.
Uh-huh.
I'm meeting with the chambers, I'm meeting with industry associations, and I'm really saying to them, come, help us, because we've got to do this.
Yeah.
And we can only do it together.
Yeah.
So just the partnership area is important. And then the support mechanisms from the government side and the ability to follow through.
Yeah.
And now we have a Department of Small Business Development. So all of us should work together
Yeah.
in an integrated manner and ensure whatever we do results
Yeah.
in more and more small companies, in thriving small companies, in growing the existing small ones to medium size,
Yeah.
in transforming the informal economy into an able, knowledgeable sector that grows into small business and then medium.
Yeah.
So it's a whole seamless kind of set of, interventions that we need to work on to get South Africa thriving.
Do you need new structures? Do you work within the old structures? What do you do?
I think you continue the conversations, you get the structures that exist focused on what needs to be done. And as I say, there are resources in the country. We have organizations in South Africa. It's the mindset change
Right.
that we need to achieve. It's when that opportunity, when that talent
Yeah.
is identified, make sure that it doesn't land in a kind of wasteland.
Yeah. Minister, do you get the same level of enthusiasm that you're talking about, that you're expressing here from your counterparts within government?
Just a few weeks ago, in February, we launched this Youth Employment Service
Yes.
initiative.
The Yes campaign.
The Yes campaign, wonderful, and I'm really looking forward to its impact on young people. And what was exciting about it was that the enthusiasm in the private sector was absolutely fantastic.
Sure.
And companies at the launch had already begun to commit, had taken on young people. And it's the shift of responsibility for change, not being seen as only a government responsibility,
Of course.
is starting to happen. And we just need to, be emphatic, I think, as government,
Yeah.
about cementing that emerging relationship. I think there have been efforts, but my sense is that we came in, secured interest,
Yeah.
then we stepped out,
Yeah.
focused on something else, then you come back. So then business doesn't take you seriously. They don't have time, really,
Absolutely.
for too many meetings, etc.
Yeah.
But I think the way the Yes Initiative has been led by the President and the sanctioning of those partnerships and supporting the initiative
Yeah.
from inception right through to its implementation
Yeah.
is the way we should operate.
Government, of course, role is central in this because you have the resources, but also, of course, you have the political leadership of the country. I'm reminded the other day I saw a story where the big CEOs, the big tech companies in the US were meeting with President Donald Trump to map a way forward for the next wave in technology, the fourth industrial revolution. And I sat there thinking, what is South Africa doing on that front? Then I got this opportunity and I thought, here's my chance. Minister, what are you doing about the fourth industrial revolution?
Well, we've already established a joint task team between the private sector and the state. And it's working to see the areas, identify the areas in which we already have a great deal. And I've been intrigued, actually, at the presence of technology in South Africa, particularly in telecommunications,
Sure.
in financial services, in energy. And I think there are areas that we can do more investing in,
Yeah.
and we'll just have a growth. And just 2 weeks ago, government indicated that it is going to publish the next iteration of the Industrial Policy Action Plan.
Yes, I saw.
And embedded within it is a very strong component on the fourth industrial revolution.
Talking about research, though, what are you approaching this from a standpoint where we work with the universities, or does this call for a totally radical new approach in terms of trying South Africa to quickly get up to speed? Because already many companies in places like the US, Germany, etc., are already getting more efficient using these new technologies. Whereas here, yes, we worry about jobs, but those jobs are going to be threatened in the future, because you hear a lot about reskilling. What are we doing on that front?
Well, this is something we're also discussing with universities, programs for reskilling, and really the discussion through the IMC. It includes universities, by the way.
Oh, okay.
They're part of the task team.
I want to
as
know when
well
their
as
next meeting. I want to
CEOs
sit in the
private
corner.
sector. Well, I don't know. I'll talk to the minister who's chairing and say to him, you're interested, maybe you should do a briefing.
Sure.
But it includes certainly in-skilling and upskilling, because this fourth industrial revolution has so many components to it. People are thinking it's all artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
but it's much more than that. It's bioinformatics, it's the bioeconomy, it's education, it's technology in education. So it's many areas that I think South Africa has to become more adept at. But we undermine ourselves. We actually are doing a lot. Nanotechnology, for example. We have a premier National Institute of Nanotechnology in the country. Are we supporting it adequately? So how attuned are we to what is out there? And are our regulatory support measures, our financing, is it in concert with the developments that are happening in South Africa? Because we, as you said just now, that countries are leaving us behind. You'd be surprised how far down the road we are.
Absolutely. I'd love to be surprised, Minister. We continue the conversation after the break. I'm talking to the Minister of Education and Training, and we are talking about what she is doing in that department in her second stint. When we come back, you're going to be surprised by what your children do, but you're also going to be surprised, I can tell you, by some of the things that she's been working on. Welcome back. You're watching a special edition of CNBC Africa special programming, and we are talking to the Minister of Higher Education and Training, Naledi Pandor. Minister, we spoke before we went to the break about some of the work that you're doing in trying to make sure that South Africa remains engaged within the changing global economy. And one of the questions people begin to talk about, obviously, is that there's a distance that is growing between developed and developing countries. But within that conversation comes the other big conversation, the role of women and how women can be made to ensure that they are part and parcel of that change. Your department takes center stage because you are right at the end where you make that change possible. Let's talk about your plans on that front.
Well, part of what we need to do is ensure that we support women to achieve leadership in higher education. There are some programs that we do support, but we're finding that it is an environment that is not fully supportive of women. For example, of our 26 universities, we only have 4 women vice-chancellors. This is not good enough. I've been receiving reports on levels of sexual abuse on our campuses and issues of safety for young women. You know the tragic events we've had in the past few weeks. So there's a whole culture, I think, of inequality that we need to change in our campuses.
Are you happy with the resources that government has put in on that front?
I think we need more targeted programs.
Right.
So I would want to shape interventions that would give life to the kind of leadership and participation I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So for me, if I establish, as my department does,
Yeah.
research chairs, I would say to institutions of a number of these,
Yeah.
a proportion is for women academics. We need to move beyond the notion that it's a game of numbers. It's much more than that. And even in terms of ourselves as black people, we now occupy many, many, many areas and have become a majority in them. But it is still numbers. It's not yet that critical element of ensuring that that entry is into domains of influence,
Sure.
and that the individuals exercising that influence
Yeah.
are indeed black people or women.
I would be remiss, Minister, if I don't talk about free education. How is that progressing?
Well, we're implementing the new bursary scheme of the government, which is a full grant scheme for young people. We've begun with first years. We've set an income threshold so that families that fall above that income would have to meet the costs of higher education. But for poor and working class families, government is providing full support at the inception, which is first years from 2018, and then it will grow incrementally over the next 5 years. It has been a smooth beginning to the academic year.
Okay.
But in terms of the scheme, administratively, we've had some difficulties because it's a new scheme. It was announced in December. So we are busy now ironing out the problems.
Yeah. And within that, of course, is the other conversation that has been dominating, well, academic pages for certain, around decolonizing the education system.
Oh,
yeah,
gosh,
it's going to
yes.
come. We have to talk
Yes,
about it.
no,
Minister.
it's an interesting subject.
And I know it's not just your plate.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
these are several places that
No,
we
well,
have to look at.
we don't set the curriculum of universities. You know, they
Sure.
decide. It's part of academic freedom. They decide what to teach, who's going to teach, and the structure of their programs. And there have been changes in some institutions, but we need to see much more. Students are still feeling alienated. They still feel that the academic literature that we utilize is much more of the North
Yeah,
than the South,
indeed.
and that Africa is a minuscule presence, as though Africa has no intellectual core to offer. So all of this must change. So we are investing in developing a new academic core in South Africa
Okay.
through a program we call NGAP, which is the next generation of academics program. Funds are provided to universities to employ young people as academics and to retain them in the academy and support them to achieve a PhD. And the proportions as to who benefits from that program indicate the majority must be black students and a significant proportion, at least 50% women.
I wanted to quickly get your views on the journey that you have traveled as a politician, as a mother, as a black woman in South Africa, in Africa, and abroad. Any regrets, any highs and lows?
Well, I didn't grow up in South Africa.
I know.
And sometimes that makes me sad, actually, because I feel I missed out, at least on developing long-term relationships in my country. So I feel I missed out something with that. But as a young child, our parents always made us aware that we are South Africans. So
Right.
I learned isiZulu from listening to them,
Okay.
and learned Setswana through listening to them interacting.
Sure.
You know, people are always talking about us using languages
Yeah.
in education as though it's the responsibility of education to teach us our mother tongues.
Right.
But it should begin at home, I think. So Growing up was, a sense of something. There's a country I belong to. I was born somewhere, and there's something happening there which prevents us
From going home.
from going back home. We moved from country to country.
Yeah.
And so you sort of grew up as a stranger.
Sure.
Very
It sounds
weird
to me like
feeling.
you had no choice, and politics was always going to be the place where you're going to land
Well,
up.
actually,
Did
to
you
tell
have a
you
choice?
the truth, I hated politics because I blamed it for the experience. This ANC, because, our parents would talk about the movement, the ANC. And they say, ANC says, we've got to go to London, or we're going to go to Zambia. And so I thought, this ANC, it's stopping me from having friends, changing schools because of it, I'll never do politics. And really, I grew up thinking that.
What happened?
What happened was education. That's what happened to me. I grew up believing that education is what changes lives.
Sure.
And so I couldn't understand how anybody could deny
Couldn't
another
say it any
person
other way.
education. And so I became a member of educational organizations
Yeah.
before I became a member of ANC.
Did you pass it on to your children?
I hope so. I've tried
Any
to
politics?
encourage. No,
No?
they're members of the youth
Awful.
league, of the branches,
Yeah.
but they're not politicians, and I hope they don't become politicians.
Oh, House Minister.
It's such a difficult life.
It is.
It's not a pleasant environment, and I think we need more professionals. I also think, as I said earlier, we need more entrepreneurs. Not everybody should be a politician.
Sure.
And I think young people should do other things before they become politicians.
Sure.
Then you enter with very different values.
Like Herman Mashaba, sort of.
Probably, yeah. If you have some entrepreneurial experience.
Yeah.
I mean, Herman Mashaba is not my example. My models are elsewhere.
I can understand that. Very few people know you're Muslim, Minister. Did that change anything in terms of your outlook when you converted? You don't practice it openly.
I do. I mean, the way I dress, I hope. But I believe, that religion is part of one's life, and that we derive our values from the principles we acquire either at home or from what we learn in our spiritual domain.
Sure.
So there are many shared principles in the world religions.
Sure.
And so I found that my embracing of Islam was rendered easier for having been a Christian who practiced
Right.
Christianity. So I don't see our world religions as incompatible. And so, no, it wasn't a difficulty for me.
Lastly, Minister, towards the tail end of last year, you were on President Cyril Ramaphosa's ticket at the ANC elective conference, and there were suggestions that you could be vice president. So I was looking up a little bit, and I saw you have acted as president more than 3 times, and I was thinking to myself, is higher office a goal?
No, it isn't, and
Someday.
I wasn't on anybody's ticket.
Someday.
He announced that he would love to have me as his deputy. And if you were monitoring, you would have noticed I kept out of that thing.
I would just jump in
the
and we said,
debate.
oh, she's in.
And I was nominated and would have, had I agreed, been on the list of deputy president candidates
Right.
at the ANC conference.
You said no.
But I decided to decline, yes.
Why?
Because I felt that there were enough competitors, and if they felt that's what they'd like to do, good luck to them. I was fairly happy to be a member of the National Executive Committee.
Sure.
And made my name available for that.
So here you are, Minister, serving in President Cyril Ramaphosa's administration that many people have credited with turning the country's fortunes around. Are you confident that this path will take South Africa out of the stagnation that we had seen in the past 5-6 years?
I'm certainly hopeful that it will, but it's early days. But looking at the character of the man, and the bold initiatives that have been undertaken. And I think the courageous stance that he has taken, I believe we've got good reason to be very optimistic.
And the role of women in it?
So I think as women leaders, we need to set the tone on values and ethics and articulate this tone not by making speeches of rhetoric, but in the way we conduct our lives. So I think, for me, the example always is the individual and how they live their lives and how they run their departments and the contribution they make to society. Many people make very good speeches, but when you probe their lives, it's actually scary. So I think what we see must be what we get, and what we see must be good.
Minister, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Minister Naledi Pandor, the Minister of Higher Education and Training, thank you very much indeed for watching this special broadcast of CNBC Africa. Until next time, goodbye.